Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. The title is Empowering Joint Health and Safety Committees, a Review of Roles and Responsibility. I'm James Muccio, and I'm an occupational hygienist with the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers. I'm a CIH and CRSP. I've been at Ocal for about 16 years now. And I'm here with Sonia Lau. She's also a CIH and a CRSP, and also an occupational hygienist with Ocal.
Thank you, James. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background with regards to our experience with working with joint health and safety committees. I've practiced now for about 26 years, either being on a committee or facilitating meetings and helping committees with regards to their functioning and providing them workshops and educationals. At one workplace prior to Ocal, I had to set up about 7 committees for the same workplace who had various plants, if you will. And although structurally they were sound and they were similar, personalities did play a role in how they all function. So we're going to talk about that as we go forward in the presentation. So the undertone of the presentation is about dysfunctional committees. And if you feel that you're alone, you're not. There's a lot of dysfunctional committees. There's lots of reasons for that. And that's what the whole purpose of this workshop is today, is to help you learn about your rights, the legislation, and how committees ought to function. And we're going to give you tools to help you function better. This session would be better served in real time to the actual workplace so that the committee members can ask us questions during real time, and so we can help them. We set this up as a workshop, but we felt there was a need to have this posted for you virtually for those committees that can't reach us or need the help immediately and just want to, have a guideline to begin with. So, James, what are your thoughts on joint health and safety committees?
Yeah, joint health and safety committees, they're written into legislation, are an excellent tool when things are running smoothly for prevention and identifying hazards and controlling hazards. But, they do need to be functioning committee to get those things accomplished.
Correct, James.
All right, so throughout today's webinar, we're going to talk about Ocal, or the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers. We'll let you know who we are and what we do. We're going to talk about the Joint Health and Safety Committee roles and responsibilities. And then we're going to give some tools and document organization tips for Joint Health and Safety Committees. There is a guide for Health and Safety Committee and reps on the Ministry of Labor and Training Skills Development for Ontario. We use this guide to make most of today's presentation, and we just hope to present it to you in an easily understandable way. So here's a map of Ontario. Each icon on the map represents a clinic location. So we have clinics in Ottawa, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Toronto, Hamilton, Sarnia, and Windsor. So one way or another, we cover the whole province of Ontario. So what do we exactly do at Ocal? Well, you notice that in the title, we have clinic in the title. So we have a medical service, and we service mostly workers who have been denied compensation, and we help them with the medical part of their claim. So that's one of our main services. We also we call it a group service. This is where we service workplaces and workers, or groups of workers. So we can help a workplace out with industrial hygiene issues, ergonomics, anything along those lines. We have an inquiry service. Basically, anyone can call us with any workplace issue, and we can try and help them out, no matter how simple or complex the question is. We do a lot of outreach and education. If you go on our website, there's a lot of podcasts and webinars that are out there. We used to do more live type of things, but things have changed, obviously. And when we're not busy with the first 4 things, we do a little bit of research on the side. Again, if you go on our website, we do have some examples of some of the research that Ocal has done. So who can use our services? Basically, anyone can use our services. Health professionals, doctors, nurses, employers, employees, joint health and safety committees. Again, joint health and safety committees, when we go to a workplace or we're trying to help a workplace out, we like to work with the joint health and safety committee and support them, give them recommendations. That's our way into the workplace, and that's how we service all the workers in that workplace usually. Any support staff, lawyers, so basically anyone can use our services. All right, so at each clinic, we have what we call a multidisciplinary occupational health team, and this consists of client service coordinators, ergonomists, occupational hygienists, such as Sonia and myself, occupational health nurses, and physicians. And even though we strive for prevention and interventions of exposures and health problems, even though that's what we strive for, a lot of our work does end up being reactive to things, but we do strive for prevention.
So with regards to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Act is built upon the principle that employers and employees must act together to ensure health and safety at the workplace. So in layman's terms, this is indirectly referring to the internal responsibility system. You unfortunately won't see this term in the Act, but this is what it means, that you have an employee-employer relationship or a partnership to help ensure a safe and disease-free workplace. And basically everyone in the workplace is responsible for his or her safety and for the safety of their coworkers. So safety is everyone's job. Next. So just as an FYI, in Ontario, we call committees joint health and safety committees, but throughout Canada, they're called different terms. You might find industrial health and safety committee or joint worksite health and safety committee, health and safety committee. Everybody of the different provinces have different terms for joint health and safety committees. So we call ours joint health and safety committees. This was just an FYI. Next. So what does Joint Health and Safety Committee mean to you? Let's have a look. Next. First of all, they are necessary because it's the law. It's in our legislation. And the Joint Health and Safety Committees strive to provide greater protection against workplace injury and illnesses, means they try to help reduce human suffering, reduce work-related accidents and incidents, and work-related deaths through various functions. And we're going to talk about those functions. Next. So the committee itself is a voice for the employees and their body to keep employees informed and to help give the voice of the employees where they can discuss the issues that employees have brought forward or that they've picked up through inspections, through accidents, through recommendations. And this is where they have the opportunity or ought to have the opportunity to discuss those issues and concern and find resolutions and ensure that those recommendations are taken, given attention, and they're acted upon. Next. So the committee is composed of worker members representing the employees that have no managerial functions and management members representing the employers. And together they are committed to improving health and safety conditions in the workplace through identification of potential health and safety problems or concerns and challenges and bring them to the employer's attention. And they must be kept informed of health and safety developments in the workplace as well. Next. So if I were to ask you, where would you place the Joint Health and Safety Committee and or the Health and Safety Manager on an organizational chart? Would they be under the CEO? Would they be under supervision? Would they be in the employee section? Where would they be found? If this slide is any visual indication of the answer, The Joint Health and Safety Committee and Health and Safety Department itself are not part of the organizational chart per se because they act as an advisory body. So they shouldn't be part of the organizational chart. If you can mentally understand that in the sense that once you put them on the organizational chart, then they sort of belong in a silo. They sort of belong in a department on their own. But no, they should be integrated in each and every level of the workplace functioning. And they are not a third party, but like I said, they act as an advisory body to each and every one of those functions of your workplace. Next. So the role of the committee, like I said, they act as an advisory body that helps stimulate awareness of safety issues. They recognize workplace hazards through their inspections and through their voicing of employee concerns to the committee and then the employer. They find ways to address the hazards identified and provide corrective action where non-conformances are identified. They don't provide the corrective action, they provide the means for the corrective action and they indicate what needs to be done, in other words, and the correct departments such as the supervisors or custodian staff or management then have to rectify and exercise and provide the rectification to those corrective action recommendations. And they should also know who to assign the corrective actions. If you just leave it open, then things won't get done. Next. So the advantages of having a committee are, A, they're a forum for bringing the internal responsibility system into practice. Together they work as one team representing all employees. So there's no sides. Once you're on the committee, the functioning of the committee is that there is no sides, even though you have management reps and employee reps. You come together as one team to face and to sort of tackle health and safety concerns and challenges. And again, the mission is to give health and safety a voice. Next. So some of the responsibilities and powers of the Joint Health and Safety Committee or a health and safety representative, taken right out of the Act, Section 918, they are to identify workplace hazards. They are to inspect the workplace at least once a month. They are to be consulted about workplace testing. So anytime you have testing or before you have testing done in the workplace for contaminants, the Joint Health and Safety Committee should be consulted prior to the testing and should be given a voice so they can offer suggestions as to what needs to be tested, what areas are of concern, and they should be given a choice of who's going to actually conduct the testing. If the employer has 3 suggestions, for example, the Joint Health and Safety Committee should be given the opportunity to suggest of those 3 which ones or provide their own, for example. And that discussion needs to be had. Section 810, they make recommendations to the employer and investigate work refusals as per Section 43.4 and accidents. Next. So who is responsible for establishing the Joint Health and Safety Committee? Right out of the Act, Section 9.4, the constructor or the employer is responsible to ensure that they have a Joint Health and Safety Committee in place depending on the number of people in the workplace and or have a health and safety representative. In some workplaces, if the workplaces are large with thousands of people and thousands of different, let's say, campuses in a university setting, the ministry will order that the workplace have multiple committees so that you can serve the various areas in a more focused way, and then one large committee and various representatives from those committees come and meet. So that is also something that could happen where you don't just have the one committee, you have several depending on the size of your workplace. Next. So knowing that there's structure and there's laws in place, as we just seen, why do we have dysfunctional committees? Let's get into that. Next. Let's talk about some of the common issues. One of the issues where committees can become dysfunctional is you have management is over involved in the committee, and so there's lots of micromanaging occurring. Just think about it. If you have the plant manager or the CEO of the company on the Health and Safety Committee, and this committee is supposed to be the voice for the employees. Employees on the committee themselves might be too timid or fearful of speaking up, even though they're there to speak on behalf of the employees. But because the plant manager is there, or the big boss, or the CEO is present on the committee, then they naturally feel that they cannot speak up, and so issues won't get discussed as they normally would if the plant manager wasn't present. Sometimes you could have a very supportive plant manager on the committee, and recall I had told you about the fact that there's one workplace where I had 7 committees for the same workplace, serving different areas, and there were some plant managers that were on those committees. And even though they were great plant managers, they had a good rapport with their employees, there was still the plant manager was sort of running the show with the committee. So it's best, even though they're showing support, it's best that they leave the committee to do their work, and let the committee come to them with the issues and not be on the committee, so the committee can tackle the issues, and discuss the issues more openly without having plant management on board. Next. So other common issues are management is under-involved on the committee, where there isn't much support. There isn't support for safety overall in the workplace. And so having a committee, first of all, might not be something that's a priority for management. So the committee will therefore struggle. The committee has no real idea of what they're responsible for in general. They don't know why they're present, why they've been selected. They don't have the proper training. They don't really know what they're supposed to be doing on this committee. Lack of effective communication amongst members. There's a this side versus that side approach, which is totally not the approach for joint health and safety committees. There's not a management side and an employee side per se, in the sense of discussing issues. The issues are supposed to be discussed as health and safety issues alone, and not, well, this is the management side and this is the employee side and let's tackle the issue. That's not the point of joint health and safety committees. The meetings aren't happening frequently enough, so issues aren't getting discussed. The inspections aren't happening frequently enough, so again, concerns aren't being raised or being discussed. Documentation, you're going to learn in the next few slides, it's very important to have proper documentation. And if you don't have proper documentation, then it's a he said, she said sort of thing, and you don't have proof of, this is a repeat item or whatnot. You need to learn to document and to stay consistent with the documentation. Thank you. Next. So now we're going to get into looking at the Act, the duties of workers and of employers, and various segments of the Act that pertain to joint health and safety committees a little bit further. Next. So duties of workers, as we all know, Section 28 of the Act states, work in compliance with the provisions of the Act and the regulations. Use or wear equipment, protective devices, or clothing that the worker's employer requires to be used or worn. Report to his or her employer or supervisor the absence of or defect in any equipment or protective device of which the worker is aware and which may endanger himself, herself, or another worker. And report to his or her supervisor any contravention of the Act or regulations or the existence of any hazards of which he or she knows. It's important just to review some of these regulations, because they do apply to the committees, but they're also a good refresher for anyone listening in on this webinar. Next.
All right, thank you, Sonia. Like some great information there. So just a reminder, all workers have 3 basic rights. So you have the right to know, you have the right to participate, and you have the right to refuse unsafe work. So it's really important to always keep in mind these 3. Okay. It was fought hard to get these put in the legislation over time. And so it's always a good idea. So the right to know, right to participate, and right to refuse. So what are some duties of employers? So the employer is expected to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. So You know, I can give a million examples of this, and I'm sure everyone can think of examples from their own workplaces where this can be applied. Um, so it's kind of a catch-all where it can be applied to any situation. So it's a very good statement that's in the considered a duty of the employer. So what are some key components of due diligence? Well, this is, as Sonia mentioned, having a documented system. As Sonia mentioned, you know, if you don't, it's a he said, she said deal where, you know, if you didn't write it down, you didn't do it, it didn't happen. So if you keep that in mind, you're always going to be writing it down. So a written policy and program supporting health and safety in the workplace, really important. Training for workplace members, and safety, just considering it being a part of every workplace program and process. And some examples of that include quality and production. So you're basically including safety in every aspect of the workplace.
Thank you, James. So the legislation states that the committee has certain rights. Well, here are a few means in which the committee can exercise those rights. So they have to identify potential hazards, evaluate potential hazards, recommend corrective actions for those hazards, and follow up on those recommendations. That's how things get done. So what are the means in which they can identify the hazards? The committee has inspections that they ought to be doing. They are to attend, or members of the committee are to attend accidents or incidents and work refusals. So that's where they hear out what the recommendations may be, and that's where they understand that, well, these are the recommendations for this issue. We need to follow up to ensure that these recommendations have been heard and that there's action taken on these recommendations. The committee also fields employee concerns. Employees need to know who the committee members are so that they can approach the committee members when their concerns aren't being dealt with. And another function that they have amongst the recommendations that they put through to employers through the inspections or through accidents, work refusals, and incidents is through a formal recommendation letter where they formally address the employer and write out what the concern is, what the recommendation is to rectify the concern, and give the employer 21 days to respond to this particular concern, health and safety concern. Next, please. So let's look at the structure for the committee. We're going to look at the size, the tools that they ought to have, type of training, terms of reference, and duties. Next. Next, please. Thank you. So which workplaces require a joint health and safety committee? Any workplace which employs 20 or more workers ought to have a joint health and safety committee. If the workplace is smaller, 6 to 19 folks on staff, then a joint health and safety committee need not be established unless you have a designated substance on board and or if you've been ordered by the Ministry of Labour Training Skills Development and or you have a construction project on which you have 20 or more workers regularly employed. But if you have a workplace with more than 5 workers but less than 20, then you should have a health and safety representative on board. Next, please. So how large should the committee be? If you have less than 50 workers, you should have a minimum of 2 members. If you have 50 or more workers, you should have at least 4 members. And of course, these are divided in worker members and employer members or management members. At least half of the committee must be worker representatives. Depending on the workplace, the entire workplace should be represented. So even though this is what's stipulated, if you have 50 members or 50 workers, you should have 2 members. But if you have various departments, such as, let's say, a paint shop or a assembly shop, and you have a body shop, for example, you want to make sure that you cover that area so that you can hear out the concerns from the various departments and rectify them. You don't want to leave vital departments out of your committee. So you should have representatives from those departments one way or another. Next, please. So what are the key responsibilities of the health and safety representative? Very similar to that of a joint health and safety committee. Basically identifying actual and potential workplace hazards, inspecting the workplace regularly, being consulted about and being present during health and safety related testing in the workplace. So these are very similar to joint health and safety committee setups and responsibilities. Making recommendations to the employer about health and safety in the workplace, participating again in investigations of work refusals or accidents and incidents, inspecting the site of a critical injury or fatality, obtaining health and safety related information from the employer. The one difference I would have to say that's a little bit different from joint health and safety committees is their requirement for training. The provisions are a little bit different there. Next, please. So selection of the committee members. So worker members are selected by employees. And again, it should be ensured that you're covering the surface area, if you will, of your workplace. I'm referring a lot to manufacturing, but even in an office setting, if you have admin, if you have folks in maintenance, and you have folks in various other departments, you want to make sure you cover a lot of the surface area so you can get the concerns from the various folks that you're representing. For the management members, the employer selects the management members. And again, consideration should be taken to ensure representatives are selected based on their knowledge of operations and to their duties within the internal responsibility system. It is recommended that supervisors are on the committee at various intervals, and you can have guests attending your joint health and safety committee meetings, such as members from various departments, or if you've had a lot of concerns that are going to be addressed in the meeting from a particular department or a shop, then you might want to have a supervisor from that shop or an employee from that shop visit and have them on board during the committee meeting so that they can further address those issues and give more details about the issues. Or you could have anyone join and help with inspections, for example, set of fresh eyes to pick up on hazards that they're seeing on the inspection. I would like to say that it's very important to keep maintenance and or custodian staff close because they can really help answer a lot of questions that come up in joint health and safety committee meetings, for example. So you don't want to have to write it down and we have to get back to this person or that person that represents maintenance. Have them on the committee and life will be that much easier and you'll get a lot more done. Next, please. So the committee member titles, and we're going to talk about like all of these individuals and what their responsibilities are as stipulated in the Act. So you ought to have a secretary and they have responsibilities from you need to have a management co-chair as well as a certified member from the management side, and you have to have a worker co-chair and a certified member from the worker side. These are skeletal, if you will. These are folks that are required on your committee, and then you can have members, which are not identified here, but you have the regular Joint Health and Safety Committee members that don't have a title, but have responsibilities as being on the committee. Next, please. So this is the tool you could utilize. It's just a grid where you identify who the worker members are, who the management members are, who is certified, the worker and management member, who requires recertification, who the co-chairs are, who the secretary is. And this is to help workers who you are serving as the committee know who to approach. And this should be posted on your Joint Health and Safety Committee boards that should also be available in your workplace. This way, like if you're there to be a voice to workers, they also need to know who you are so that they can come and approach you when they're not getting anywhere with supervision or, their concerns aren't being met. So along with providing the names, if there's a certain way to reach you by email or a phone number, you can provide that as well, or a department that you work in so that the workers know how to find you. Next, please. So here's a template for a health and safety board. I'd actually put this together for, again, that workplace where I had 7 different committees. And we had made this template and we'd actually blown it up, and this was the actual health and safety board. So the committee knew what needed to be posted, and if there was any gaps or any empty spaces, it would just visually be obvious to them that, oh, we're missing, we didn't post any of our inspections this month. We need to post those. So you could add to this. You would want to have the policy, the health and safety policy, a joint health and safety committee roles and responsibilities laid out so that folks know, what is it that the joint health and safety committee does for me? Like, not everybody knows or is educated about that. So they can visit this board and get that information. I won't go through everything. You can look at this at your leisure, but it just gives you an idea of, wow, like these are things that I need to make sure as a joint health and safety committee member that these things are posted. Accidents and incidents ought to be posted. They ought to be, you should be taking personal information out. So the name of the person involved, all of that should be taken out and removed. But the actual accident and how it was rectified, what happened, that should be posted. That should be posted for folks to see. Yeah. James, anything else you think we should add?
Maybe I know this is probably if there's hygiene sampling, any air sampling or anything. I've seen where they have a section for that. I mean, it's not totally necessary because sometimes that's only done like once every 2 years. But yeah, I think it's pretty inclusive here.
Okay, yes, it is great to post the hygiene testing for people to peruse. It might not be understandable to everybody, but at least folks know that, oh, testing has been done, and they can ask the committee, well, what did you find? You tested my area. What did you find? Do I need to be concerned? So yes, of course, that's also very, very important. Okay, next, please. Okay, terms of office or length of stay on a committee. A committee member should be on board for at least 1 year, and there should be an adequate rotation or opportunity for other members to join the committee. Next, please. So how to resolve complaints or concerns or challenges? Sorry, James, that was yours.
All right, so managing complaints. This is a big one. So the worker must report any hazard or contravention to their employer or direct supervisor. And this is also outlined in section 28. If the matter is not resolved, it's then taken to the committee. So what should the Joint Health and Safety Committee member do? They should request the first line supervisor or plant safety officer or other management figure in the area to take part in resolving the problem or issue. They should have their request noted at the next meeting and recorded in the minutes. So again, recorded in the minutes, we keep talking about, documentation. If it's not there, it didn't happen. So again, highlighting that is super important. You need to then notify the workers who reported the concern of a decision or recommendation made by the committee. So what if the complaint cannot be resolved? Well, sometimes if the complaint's not resolved, it can lead to a work refusal, which all workers have the right to refuse. If you remember from the beginning of our webinar, that is one of the three main rights. Either of the co-chairs should then inform the employer of the work refusal. If the employer cannot resolve the issue, the employer or worker can then contact a Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development inspector who will review the situation and render a decision. So what are some training requirements? So as per the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it's a requirement to have one worker rep and one management rep trained. So this is to carry on the duties of a certified Joint Health and Safety Committee member. And as Sonia mentioned in her chart she made up there, you will know who that person is and when they're due for recertification. And WSIA, which is the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, they set the standards for training and who is able to provide training programs. So certifications, if you've never heard of it, most of you have if you're attending this, but there's two parts to it. Part one is your basic certification, and this is fundamental training that covers law, hazard recognition, hazard control, inspections, and community health and safety resources. Part two is workplace specific hazard training. This is if there's any significant hazards in your workplace. If they are left uncontrolled, they could lead to injury or illness. And it includes information on how to assess those hazards, how to control and eliminate them. So you can see part one is the basic introduction, and then part two gets more specific to your own workplace or industry. So certified members, they are to participate in duties as required by the law. As we mentioned in the beginning, health and safety committees are written into the Occupational Health and Safety Act. They're to prepare research on identified items on the agenda so that they're prepared for the meetings. They're to conduct inspections, and they have the power and authority to stop work where deemed appropriate in the case of preventing serious harm or damage to workers in the facility. Now, I think a lot of members, certified members, don't realize they have that power. So that's why we highlighted it in this slide. Okay, so talking about dangerous circumstances and work stoppages. So we have bilateral and unilateral work stoppages. So this can occur when a provision of the act is being contravened and the contravention poses a danger or hazard. And this danger or hazard is present in such that any delay in controlling it may seriously endanger the worker. So all three of those that I just mentioned must exist for a work stoppage to take place. So just keep this slide in mind that you do have the power to perform a work stoppage if all three of those conditions exist. So now we're going to get a little bit into Joint Health and Safety Committee meetings. So how often should committee members meet? Well, they should be meeting at least once every 3 months, and more frequent meetings could be required based on the needs of the facility, or if you're following up on an investigation or any issues. So again, once every 3 months is the absolute minimum. A lot of times we see committees that are only meeting once a year, which is obviously not enough. So some terms of reference, a written statement of functions and operating procedures of a committee. You need to have meeting attendance, participation. You need to have records of your inspections. And quorum, this is the minimum number of participants required at a meeting or inspection.
If I could just jump in, James. So the point of the terms of reference, this is up to your committee to put a terms of reference in place. And it's a written document which stipulates when we're going to have meetings, we need at least this number of people to attend the meetings so that the meeting can go on. It's sort of it's a document which helps each and every member recognize that, you know, this is not a joke. We have rules. This is the ground rules for our Joint Health and Safety Committee. This is how we're going to do inspections. We need X number of people when we're doing our inspections, be on time. Same with the meetings. This is how we're going to handle XYZ situation. So this is, we a lot of committees don't have terms of references in place, and they ought to, because like I said, it sets down the ground rules. You can make this as in-depth, like multiple pages as you want, depending on the dynamics at your workplace. You determine how simplified or how complex you want to make this terms of reference. But every committee should have a terms of reference so that they understand above and beyond the legislation and the roles and responsibilities, how it is that we want our workplace to function when we have our meetings and do our inspections and other roles and responsibilities that we have. Sorry, James, thank you.
Good points. Thank you, Sonia. So quorum for meetings, this basically indicates that every meeting must have representatives from both the employer and employees. Beyond this, the committee can determine its own rules for a quorum at meetings. Again, the reason why, workers and employers need to be there, it's that shared responsibility that we talked about in the beginning, and that safety is everyone's responsibility. So workload and time for preparation. We're all familiar with today's workload that everyone has going on. However, as per Section 9 of the Act, the employees of the committee are entitled to take time to attend the committee meetings, conduct inspections, accompany inspectors if they're present, investigate accidents, attend and investigate work refusals, and members are to be paid accordingly if overtime is applied. So, a lot of times, when we see committees only meeting once a year, it's the time. They don't have the time. They're not given the time. So it's really important, again, that this is written right into the Act. So preparation time, again, in the Act, it says each member will be paid for 1 hour of prep time before every committee meeting. If it's not enough time, more can be allotted. So again, right from the Act, you need to be given time. So organization of the meeting. So the meeting, again, requires 2 co-chairs, worker and management reps to prep for the meeting. And it is also suggested to alternate the chairing of the meetings by the co-chairs. That way, it's not always being led by one side or the other.
So let's get into the Joint Health and Safety Committee tools and documentation requirements. So here's a sample agenda. This is just a sample. You could peruse this as you wish, as your committee wishes. So first off, depending on quorum, you do a roll call, see who's present and regrets. This is very important. This agenda alone, I can just think of one client that we're dealing with at the moment. Approval of previous meeting minutes. So another common item that I forgot to mention earlier about dysfunctional committees is where the management side takes over. They do the minutes, they run the meetings, they prepare the agenda, and so it becomes a total shift, and obviously no longer a joint health and safety committee, but a management health and safety committee. So by having number 2 there on your agenda, approval of previous meeting minutes, if there's something missing or something was not documented in the minutes that was discussed but not documented, this is where you can speak up and have it documented in your minutes. So number 2 is so important. Previous business, you could also bring up things that weren't discussed here in previous business discussions. Your workplace inspection report, that's something that should be discussed from that particular month. What issues were identified? Have they been rectified? Is this the right way to rectify the issue, and who's been assigned? And then this is where you can, write the issue off if it was been completed, and then go back to the employee and let them know the issue's been completed if it involved an employee, for example. The next thing you want to discuss are any accidents or incidents. you want to discuss what happened, how the accident or incident was rectified, what was the corrective action, short-term, long-term, and who's responsible, has it been completed? This is where those things can be discussed. So sometimes you can mark it down that, okay, yes, somebody from management on the committee stated, yes, this was completed, this is how it's been completed. But don't delete the item until you've actually visually gone back to the plant floor, gone back to the office area where the item was, and you've checked it out yourself that the item has been completed. And it's to the employee who was concerned, it's to their satisfaction. So even though you're at a meeting and things have been stated to be completed, until you double check for yourself, again talking from experience, until you double check for yourself, you go onto the shop floor or go into the workplace office, don't let that item be deleted off the list, just as a double check. Next item, any new or other health and safety concerns and or suggestions that have been brought forward to you by your membership, so your workers that you serve, any new business that you'd like to discuss, something that is of concern that maybe needs a recommendation letter to the employer, for example. If anybody needs any training and education, this is where you discuss that, and then adjournment. So that you could make this agenda more robust than the one presented, but it covers a lot of the items that should be discussed in a meeting. And it keeps everybody on track. Next, please. So the components of a typical health and safety meeting. You have the agenda. The components include your membership, the various folks that have titles such as secretary, co-chairperson, certified members. You want to have your agenda present, and basically you're talking about identified hazards, previous and current. What are the suggestions or for rectifying the hazards in place? You want to talk about any inspections or investigations and etc. Basically what was covered in the agenda. You discuss this in your meeting. That's the point of the meeting. And then the in and the out of this whole process is to provide recommendations. You're managing hazards. You're documenting meeting minutes. Again, focusing on the documentation. Having a document for the agenda for the next meeting ready, and having a date for the next meeting. And we're going to give you some tools of what these minutes could look like, or what the inspection sheet may look like for you. And of course, as I already stated, worker training and education if needed, getting help on approvals for that. Next, please. Okay, communication is key in any aspect of life, but with committees, it's very important. So first off, meeting dates should be established in an ideal setting on a preset schedule or at the conclusion of each committee meeting, preferably a year before, for meetings and inspection. If you have a schedule in place, you're going to have more commitment in place from supervision as well to relieve their employees to go on the inspections and have the meetings. So the more organized you are, the more easier it will be, and you'll face less challenges with getting quorum, with getting people relieved to attend meetings and inspections. The date of the next meeting shall be recorded on the minutes, so everybody knows it's recorded. People can refer back to it if they forget. Post and distribute the schedule to ensure that dates can be met and commitment from all members is reflected. And copies of the minutes should be distributed shortly after the meetings, no later than a week after the meeting, and must also be signed by the co-chairs. Again, the signature of the co-chairs on the meeting minutes is very important, so that it shows that both, I hate to segregate, but both management side and employee side have approved the minutes, and here we are, here it is, it is ready for launch. We have together committed to what is being discussed and how it's being rectified, and here's the document, and we're signing off. So these things might seem minute at first and all like not important, but as you gain more experience with joint health and safety committees and their functioning or dysfunctioning, you understand why these little things, these gestures, actually carry much weight when things happen in the workplace, or you have an accident and the ministry comes in and ask for documentation on how you handled previous incidents before this accident actually has occurred, for example. So if you have documentation to prove your due diligence, then you're in a better situation than if you don't. Next, please. Pardon me. So the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes must be recorded and available for review on request by the Ministry of Labour for Training and Skills Development as per Section 922. It must contain details of all matters discussed. So not just matters that you want to have highlighted. Everything that was discussed, you're there for a reason, ought to be documented. Minutes should identify member groups or employee titles responsible for corrective action. So we've stated this before. When you're doing an inspection and you recognize, there's a hazard and here's your recommendation, you should be assigning a responsible party to that so that you have someone, this is a negative way of saying it, but you have someone to chase, or you have someone accountable, if you will, for that particular recommendation, and you have a target date or a recommended target date for corrective action to be completed on that particular concern. And minutes need to be signed, again, as already stated, by co-chairs and posted with 1 week on the health and safety boards and distributed accordingly. This would be done by the secretary. Next, please. Okay, organization of recommendations. How does your committee succeed? So there's different avenues where the committee is being is collecting recommendations. So these recommendations obviously come from health and safety concerns. You have your inspections, you have your accidents or incidents, you have employee concerns that just come randomly, could come to a committee member or to the committee as a whole, where somebody addresses them through an email or just vocally. So there's various avenues. And how do you keep track of everything? Because these are all different documents if you have documents in the first place, but these are all different documents. So let's have a look. Next, please. So like I said, you have various avenues. You have employee concerns, you have your Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting minutes, whatever has been discussed there. So you have to have accountability to what's happening there. You have to have accountability to what's happening in the inspections. Accountability in the sense that you have someone that you need to chase to ensure that those issues have been addressed. And same with recommendations that come out of accidents, incidents, or work refusals. So how do you put this all, or how do you keep track of everything? So one of the solutions that we've come up with is, next slide, please, a corrective action matrix, where all the corrective action that comes out of the recommendations from accidents or incidents, you pull those out. All the corrective action or everything that you have in your inspections, you dump into this corrective action matrix and pull those out. Anything that comes out of Joint Health and Safety Committee minutes, where there might be concern that's been raised there, and there's a responsible party and a target date required for corrective action, you pull that out, put it into this corrective action matrix, and same with employee concerns. So what does this potentially look like? Next slide, please. Here's an example. This is an Excel file, and basically you could have a reference number as per the very left of the slide on your screen, the location. Where is this actual item? You want to make sure that you're very specific so that somebody who randomly who picks up this document can actually follow your guidance and go to this particular location and find it. If it's easily found, it can be easily rectified. For example, if maintenance needs to fix something, or if you've signed maintenance to this issue, you need to make sure that you've correctly identified where exactly this issue is. In this workplace, for example, it says Linda M's desk. So maybe that was really obvious. But for example, if it's in a plant or a shop floor, you want to make sure you identify the bay number of the particular area, the column numbers, if you will, and maybe even put in coordinates north, south, east, west of this area to correctly identify where the issue is and what the concern is. So what is the item origin? So remember, there's so many. It could be an inspection, an accident, it could be an employee concern. So you want to make sure you identify, where did this come from? So it's your Joint Health and Safety Committee inspection. What was the date of origin? When was it identified? So the date of origin and the target date for completion, those two dates are very important. So you know, or a manager knows, or the ministry knows, it was identified on October 1st of, let's say, this year, and the target date for completion was 1 month. Let's say, a few months later, this issue still hasn't been resolved. Well, there is a non-conformance, and the ministry will pick up on dysfunctions of not necessarily the committee because you're identifying issues, but something's going on with management or something's going on with getting things fixed. And this is where they might fine you or provide guidance on how to get things done more efficiently and or order you to get things done. Next item here is the health and safety issue. So what is the concern? You can't just say something like, in this particular example, it's an office related issue. Improper keyboard placement and keyboard. We could go a step further and say, well, improper keyboard placement, the keyboard is not suitable for the job, and maybe the employee needs training on posture or needs to have an ergonomic setup for her office, for example, in this case. So you need to wordsmith properly and identify the concerns properly so that they can be rectified properly. So then the recommendation, I won't read it out here because we're going to go through another example, but that's where you put what it is that you want as a committee to rectify this particular issue and make sure it doesn't keep reoccurring. Here, responsible group, in this case, they've put supervision for admin. If you have a particular name who you know, Linda M's supervisor, then you would put the supervisor's name and your suitable target date that this item should be completed by. The status of this is open because it's new, it's newly identified, for example, or it could be on progress, or it could be closed. And then the priority hazard, which we'll get into, is it an A, a B, or a C? So basically what this matrix is a full-fledged comprehensive document that incorporates all the items from all the different other documents that you have in your workplace, your accidents, your work refusals, your incidents, your inspections. Everything is documented there in their respective areas, but then you're pulling all of that out into this one document. And this one document could be the document that you discuss in your Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting because everything is right there. It's right in front of you. You don't have to sift through other paperwork. Again, this is just a suggestion. It has worked in previous workplaces where I have worked and I've set up with my committees, and it's really kept people up on track on all the various issues in large and small workplaces. Next, please. So, for example, this is just an accident report, just a generic template for an accident report. And if you look on the right side where you have analysis and prevention, this is where on an accident report, you would have a supervisor putting in what was done, what happened, and what is going to be done to rectify and prevent such an occurrence in the future. So this is where you would take the concern and take the recommendation and the target date for completion, pull it out of the accident, and somebody would have to dump it into that corrective action matrix so that you are sure of discussing this issue and it's not getting lost in a binder somewhere and you forget to discuss this issue at the Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting. Next, please.
All right, thank you, Sonia. Excellent information there. So now let's just go through some roles and responsibilities. Again, this is kind of a review of a previous slide, but here we have, at the top, we have the Joint Health and Safety Committee. You have your secretary who's going to take the minutes. You have your management members, your co-chairs, worker members, co-chairs, and certified members. So the secretary will definitely be the one who's keeping minutes of the meetings. They'll distribute the meetings and they'll be signed by the co-chairs. They're the record keeper. They'll provide copies of the records to Joint Health and Safety committees. Supervisors are to be given copies of the inspections and meetings, and they're to copy inspection reports to the supervisor and committee within 2 days. So there's a lot of times where a lot of this stuff doesn't happen, but it is outlined. And it's very clear as to what needs to be done. So what are the committee members' duties? Well, they're to attend all meetings and inspections as scheduled. They're to maintain confidentialities in areas involving medical information and company trade secrets. And they're obligated to participate in training provided by the company to committee members. And they're to act as a liaison between management and workers. So again, attend, maintain, participate, and act. So let's talk a little bit about management. So plant management, it's recommended that they attend at least one meeting of the Joint Health and Safety Committee on an annual basis. And this kind of gets them, not there all the time, because then some people might be afraid to speak up, but it gets them there once a year, just so they can see how things are operating. And management member will report to the committee any step he or she has taken to ameliorate the health and safety program as it relates to themselves and their specific departments. All right, so let's talk about the employer responsibilities to the committee. They're to provide a meeting room, choose management committee members, inform the committee of any work-related accidents involving injury, death, or occupational illness, and to provide the committee with results of reports with regards to health and safety in the workplace. So recommendations, a copy is to be provided to the Health and Safety Coordinator and Joint Health and Safety Committee. So if recommendations are made, the employer must provide a written response to the committee recommendations within 21 days. Okay, so they have 21 days to respond. This is really important. They're not to go over that 21 days as specified in the Act under Section 9. So if accepted, the employer writes back, says, okay, yep, we're going to do your recommendations. They must have a timetable for corrective action to take place. Okay, they can't just say, yeah, we're going to do it, because it could be 5 years from now. So they're supposed to have a target date. And if they are not going to do the recommendations, they must have a good reason why, and it must be documented for the committee as to the reasons why they're not going to do it. So in response to recommendations, a constructor or employer who receives written recommendations from a committee or co-chair shall respond in writing within the 21 days that we talked about. And here's the specific section where it's mentioned. So we just wanted you guys to have that for reference. And then a response of a constructor or employer under subsection 20 shall contain a timetable for implementing the recommendations. And again, we just wanted you to have the exact location of where that is, because if you are not getting responses within that time, or they're not providing a timetable, you can go back to them and say, this is what you are supposed to be doing. This is what is required under the law. Okay, so continuing with the employer's duty. So the Health and Safety Act places a general duty on an employer to assist in the functioning of the committee and the representative. So under this, we have workplace hazards, changes in procedures or new safety equipment, copy of all reports from the Ministry of Labor and Training Skills Development, and they're to accompany the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development on inspections, and they're to provide information on designated substance regulations where they apply in the workplace. The employer must also provide all information requested by the committee with regards to hazards, change in processes, policies, or machinery. They're to provide a copy of the orders received by the Ministry of Labor and post on the health and safety boards. And they're to afford worker members the right to inspect the workplace, accompany inspectors, and attend and prepare for meetings, which we kind of mentioned earlier in the webinar, and about time is to be given and how much time is to be given. So under Section 9 does cover employer duties. And the employer must share any knowledge of the health and safety practices, tests, and standards in the industry. And they must report lost time injuries caused by any accident, explosion, or fire at the workplace. And they also must report any occupational illness of which he or she has knowledge of. And that's from Section 2 of the Act. So when it comes to designated substances, the employer is to provide each member of the committee with a copy of the assessment and the control program reports. In case anyone isn't familiar, if there is a designated substance in the workplace, an assessment needs to be done and a control program needs to be done for it, and it needs to be then given to the committee. And the committee or rep should receive reports from a physician examining the workers who are under a certain medical surveillance program required by each regulation. So most designated substances require medical surveillance. For example, in the case of silica, the workers go to a physician. I think it's every 2 years, if I remember correctly, and then they do a breathing test, and if any other tests are needed, the physician can order. Now, usually the only thing that goes back to the workplace is fit or unfit for work, so that's all the workplace will get. They don't usually get all of the workers' medical info. So this is basically just saying that that report goes to the Health and Safety Committee. So the last one there, the employer must provide the committee or rep with results of tests on both airborne concentration of the substance and worker exposure to it. So again, this is occupational or industrial hygiene air sampling given to the committee, and the committee members, again, if you remember from earlier, they are allowed to be present when sampling is done, and those results can also be posted on the Health and Safety Board. So it is an offense for an employer to hinder the Joint Health and Safety Committee from carrying out their duties as committee members. So any of these duties that we've outlined, if you're being stopped from doing them, then it is an offense under the Health and Safety Act. And I'm going to pass it over to Sonia to cover the rights.
Thank you, James. So what are the Joint Health and Safety Committee rights? They have the right to inspect the workplace, so they must be relieved of their primary duties to do so. They have the right to prepare for meetings. They have the right to be consulted about workplace testing and offer recommendations, and to be present during testing. They have the right to make recommendations to the employer, and they have the right to investigate work refusals, accidents, critical injuries, and incidents as well. Next, please. So busy slide. These are from section 18, the powers of the committee. So we've spoken about this already, but basically, in a nutshell, identify situations and or hazards in the workplace. They have the power to make recommendations to the constructor or employer with regards to the health and safety concerns. Recommend to the constructor or employer and the workers of the establishment maintenance and monitoring of programs, measures, and procedures respecting health and safety of workers. They have the right to obtain information from the constructor employer regarding identification of potential or existing hazards of materials, processes, or equipment in the workplace. They have the right to obtain information from the constructor or employer concerning conducting or taking tests of any equipment, machine, device, article, or thing. And they have the right, and it's their function or power to be consulted about and have designated member representing workers at the beginning of, during, and at the end of testing in the workplace. Next, please. Supervisors' duties with regards to joint health and safety committees. They ought to participate as committee members as scheduled, ensure that the committee members are allowed required time for committee meetings, inspections, preparation, time for meetings, provide all necessary assistance to the committee members in the performance of their duties, and participate in inspections as required. Next. So the Ministry of Labour Training and Skills Development. They are and they have the authority to inspect the workplace without given notice, any section of the workplace. They have the authority to issue orders, issue fines and penalties to the workplace. They can shut down the facility if they deem so, and when appropriate. They can demand information and documents as required, and they uphold and enforce the Act. So again, not that this is speaking just to documentation, but documentation is very important. So you need to start documenting anything and everything that you do as a committee with regards to your meeting minutes, having agendas, your inspections. You should have them all in a one-stop shop like the Corrective Active Matrix, and you must have them in their own relevant binders, if you will, all the inspections, all the accidents, etc. that we've spoken about. Next, please. So the Joint Health and Safety Committee and their interaction with the ministry. So as per section 54, the ministry will call on Joint Health and Safety Committee, usually employee member at most at first, when they're coming in to inspect the workplace due to an anonymous call or a call from the company to do so, during accident or critical injury investigations, during work stoppages, during work refusals, and during appeals. Next, please. Okay, duties of the co-chairs. Oh, sorry, this is yours, James.
No worries, Sonia. So yeah, duties of the co-chairs. They're to participate in drafting agendas and recommendation forms. They're to review and sign committee meeting minutes and secretary to distribute. They're to act as chair for every alternating committee meeting or as deemed appropriate. And they're to present and discuss matters with senior executives and the safety officer. All right, work refusals. So what is a work refusal? Again, just to highlight, every worker has the right to refuse unsafe work when he or she has reason to believe that they will be endangered by performing the work that is required. So what happens in the event of a work refusal? The committee member representing the employees must be present during the investigation, and the worker supervisor carries out the investigation. If the issue is not resolved, a second stage work refusal then results. And this is where the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development must be contacted by the health and safety coordinator or worker rep or employer. The inspector conducts an investigation and renders a solution. So there is multiple steps when someone does a work refusal.
So for review, in the event of an injury or death, a critical injury, worker members of the committee must designate one or more worker members to investigate the accident in which a critical injury has occurred. And this is where you can cover this in your terms of reference. Following the investigation, all findings must be reported to the committee and the ministry to evaluate the situation and recommend actions to prevent reoccurrences. definition, again, for review, it's good to revisit this. The critical injury is defined as it places life in jeopardy, it produces unconsciousness, there's a substantial loss of blood, fracture of a leg or arm, amputation of leg, arm, hand, foot, major burns, loss of sight. So, Joint Health and Safety Committee workplace inspections. Let's have a look. The inspections, as already stipulated, must be carried out at least once per month, unless the ministry has ordered a different schedule based on the size of your workplace. It could be on a different schedule altogether rather than once per month because of, again, the square footage. In cases where the workplace is too large, the committee should establish a monthly inspection schedule that ensures the entire workplace will be inspected at least once a year. An inspection schedule shall be formulated with assigned names at the beginning of the year to allow for ample preparation times for the representative parties and ensure that those parties are relieved of their primary job duties to conduct the inspections. Next, please. So, the committee members who represent workers must select a member to inspect the workplace. Again, this should be stipulated in your terms of reference. And if possible, this should be a certified member because they have the training on how to conduct the inspections. So that's why certified members are usually required. But if the entire membership of the committee is trained on the worker side specifically, then of course you can select any committee member for this task. Or multiple committee members. It's not just that one committee member must go. You could have multiple as well. The more, the better. Next, please. So the objectives of the inspections: to identify and record, again, documentation. Identify and record potential and actual hazards. One thing that I want to mention before I carry on, if you see something on an inspection as a committee and you've rectified the issue right there and then, during the inspection, it's still very important to document what the issue was, as you would normally with any other concern. Document it, what was the recommendation, who was assigned, and you can mark that it's been closed right there on your inspection sheet and put it on your corrective action matrix as well, because again, it shows your due diligence as a committee. But it's very important to document it because if it comes up again, and it comes up again, you have this documentation that you addressed this at one time, but it's still happening. So there's a root cause that needs to be addressed if it continues to occur. So ensure that when you're doing inspections and you're rectifying issues, that's great. And you're rectifying them right away, that's also super, but you should be documenting that these issues are coming up, that, there was a faulty ladder, for example, in the workplace, and we had the supervisor remove and discard the ladder. Great, but why wasn't it removed already? Were people using this ladder? So there's so many things that, to get to the root cause, you need to document why things are happening and that you've rectified, but you need to discuss why things are happening in your committee meetings. Okay, next item, identify and have corrected any hazard which can be corrected immediately. Ensure that the EH&S program is working effectively. And how do you do that? Well, you can interview workers as you go along during the inspections and ask if they have any concerns. And this is where you can pick up other things that should, again, be documented in your inspection. The inspection is not just to, go on with just go on looking for hazards. You also want to speak to the folks that are on the line or in the offices and ask them if they have any concerns for hazards that you have not been privy to or that are not obvious to you in the workplace. And you can refer to any checklists or guidelines for your inspections so that if you've become too immune to the workplace, that you continue to make sure that you're checking off things on these checklists or guidelines and looking for things that you might not have remembered to do so. And we could provide you some samples of these if you would like. Just send us an email. Thanks. Next. So here's an example And it looks similar to the corrective action matrix. It's a similar format, but here is the platform for your Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting minutes. And again, like as we stipulated earlier, you put the problem origin so you know what you're discussing. You can be discussing some things that came off the inspections or safety concerns that have come up during the course of that period before the meeting. Is there anything else from this? Yes, and the date of the next meeting is stipulated on the meeting minutes as we talked about earlier. Next, please. So as promised, we were going to talk about the hazard categories, hazard A through C. So hazard A is defined as major, requires immediate attention, or health and safety is at risk for the employee or employees involved. Hazard B, it's serious, it requires short-term action, but the long-term action can wait if it can't be attended to right away. And hazard C, it's minor and it requires long-term action. Something does need to be done, but nobody will be injured if it's left, if it's given a target date, you know, for a month or 2 or 3 from now, for example. So those are the basic hazard categories that we stipulate on. Maybe James, if you go back to the previous slide, just to show, like, for example, the desk, the ergonomic issue with the keyboard, this hazard category was given a B. If we don't address it soon, it could lead to a chronic injury for this particular worker. So yes, you have some time. It's not a critical injury that will occur, but let's get to it. So that's just giving you an example of how this was categorized with regards to the hazard. Next, please. Next. Okay, so documentation. We've already given you hints about certain things that need to be documented and how they can be documented. You should have a Joint Health and Safety Committee binder. We've labeled it an activity binder because all of these items are activities, your inspections, your meetings, all your agendas should all be in one particular binder. Let's say, for example, the ministry calls and has they're on your premises and they call for a Joint Health and Safety Committee worker member and they ask for documentation. Everybody should know where this documentation is. It's great to have it online, but hard copies are always best. Easier to find when you're under pressure and nervous, when you have the ministry standing right next to you over your shoulder. It's good to have these handy and everybody should know where you could have multiple, but they should all have the same contents in them and updated. So the secretary would have that job to update all the binders if you have multiple ones. And so she would also have to have a proper log of how many binders she has and that she or he has updated all of the binders. So let's see what's in the, we'll have a look in the next few slides of what's in these binders. Next, please. And there it is. So here's a list of items that you can include here. The plant policy, the ministry may want to have a look at that. So you're not looking for it while you have the ministry right there. Remember, when the ministry comes into your workplace, you want to keep them focused on the issue at hand because, again, they have the right to go to any area in the workplace, of course, with your accompaniment. And they could look at anything and everything they wish to. They have that authority. So if you want to ensure that they're focused on the issue at hand that perhaps you have called them in for or you didn't know, but they're there, you want to make sure you have the information ready and at hand and you're not looking for it. And they're not going out into other areas that you might not want them to visit at that particular time. Anyhow, so going back to your manual, you want to have your plant policy, the list of all your Joint Health and Safety Committee members, how to contact them. And again, this list should be on your Health and Safety Board as well. We've spoken about that. Your policy, your roles and responsibilities, your terms of reference could be included in this binder. Your agendas, all of them. Recommendation letters, if you've put out any, they should be here documented for the ministry to review and see how the employer has responded and if they responded in a timely manner and if their response was rectified or not rectified, but if their response rectified the issue at hand. Any of the Ministry of Labor documents, orders, suggestions, that type of thing, any memos, internal memos, any meeting, any emails between members of the Joint Health and Safety Committee that are pertinent to be involved here and recorded. Accidents, incidents, investigation report should also be in this particular binder. Your corrective action matrix, if you've decided to go that route, your health and safety checklists, and any other documents that you feel are relevant and required to be in this manual. Next, please. So the workplace inspection, and we're going to give you an example, a virtual example. So let's have a look. So the inspection report also looks very similar to the matrix and the meeting minutes. As you can see, you've pretty much every item has a reference number. What's the location? We've spoken about this earlier. Item origin on your inspection report would be inspection, date of origin, the issue, etc. So you've seen this already. Let's have a look at something in a workplace. Next. So let's say you're conducting an inspection and you see this. You see an improper use of a ladder, an improper use of equipment to extend that ladder. And what do you do? Or how do you record? Or do you record? Because if you're diligent and you see this, you obviously would want, hopefully, not obviously, you would want the employee to safely come down from the ladder so that you can safely speak to the employee and then rectify the issue once they're in a safe position. Rectifying the issue would be to get them an appropriate ladder, calling on to their supervisor, and asking the supervisor why they don't have an appropriate length ladder, or ensuring that they get one and that this job be halted until that step is taken. So let's say you've done all that. You still want to record, as I stipulated earlier, that such a thing happened, such a concern or hazard was noted, and you want to talk about how you rectified or how you're going to rectify or who is going to rectify the issue, etc. So let's have a look. Next slide, please. So here's one example of how you could write up this. I'm not saying it's the best way to write this up, but here's an example. There is no location identified, so there's a problem. Problem origin, inspection, perfect. Date is indicated, health and safety issue, wrong use of ladder. Okay, but there was a little bit more to it. There was a wrong use of ladder. Why was it being used this way? Was the employee trained on the use of ladders? Why were they using a bucket to extend the ladder? Okay, the recommendation, change the ladder. Okay, fine, but will that prevent this from reoccurring? Probably not. Who's the responsible group? Yes, James?
Yeah, I mean, change ladder is fine, but the more specific language you use, I think the better. Like saying on a ladder of the appropriate height for the task.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. And then the responsible group management. Well, if you leave it open, who are you going to chase after? Who are you going to have rectify the issue? That's why it's important to have a responsible group. And in this case, it would be the supervisor of the employee and an appropriate target date. What's the status and what's the priority? Sometimes priorities could be debated. Somebody might say A for this or B. At least having a priority stipulated is important because it gives relevance to the target dates that you've put in place. Okay, let's look at a contrast version of a write-up. Next, please. And this is why I've labeled the slide the power of wordsmithing. So some may think, oh, this is overboard, but have a look and see if it is or not. So what's the location? Near reception desk. Problem origin, inspection. Date, the date. Health and safety issue. Improper use of ladder, inappropriate sized ladder used, unsafe positioning on ladder with bucket. So those are some of the issues that have been noted. Recommendation, retrain employees with regards to ladder use, purchase of various size ladders for various jobs, informed employees supervisor and requested employee to stop work, supervisor to investigate why the employees were working this way, review previous training records and see if there is a gap amongst other employees as well. Who is the responsible group? Supervisor is the responsible group, and they are to hire a third party for training for ladder safety and supervisor to order ladders from maintenance. So there's two tasks here. What is the target date? A month, a month from the date of origin. What's the status? I don't think it would be overdue, but it would be open. And the priority here is changed to A. If that employee had fallen, they could have been severely hurt, they could have hit their head. So just to give you a contrast of how you might have written up something and how it could have been written up better, so that A, you could find the actual location, and B, you're actually targeting what the issues are. And by targeting what the issues are in a more in-depth, almost root cause sort of manner, you're going to prevent a reoccurrence, likely prevent a reoccurrence, because you're getting closer to the root cause of why this might have happened. There wasn't enough training. They didn't have enough ladders. Maybe the employer didn't know who to, the employee didn't know who to approach. They don't know their supervisor. It could be a lot of things. But you can address those issues by being a little bit more specific in your identification of the hazard and the recommendation of how you want this issue rectified and eliminated so it doesn't happen again. I shouldn't say eliminate, prevent recurrence, if you will. James, do you have anything to add?
No, you can just, I mean, you can see how putting in the more details, the better,
Yes. Yeah.
because that's actually going to get, um, it's going to get them to jump and go order new ladders and train the workers, and then increasing the priority hazard does that as well. And that's what we want. We want action.
Yes. And you might have noticed, and I forgot to mention this on previous slides with the matrix, and there might have been an example of an inspection. Some items were shaded in red. So something that I used to do when a hazard was priority A is I would actually shade those items in red. So supervision management, whoever was sitting at the table with me when we were discussing these issues outside of Joint Health and Safety Committee meetings, they would be alerted that, okay, I have this item is shaded as red and my name is assigned to it. I don't want my boss to see this, and I want to make sure I rectify this immediately. So you can also color code based on the hazards to you can get creative as you wish, but I find the red shading really did draw attention, A, to the supervisors that were responsible, and to upper management who might have been responsible for those supervisors to see, hey, are you doing your job, and why is your name on here? Why is our department on here? Let's get this issue resolved and out. So you can get creative on how you want to draw attention to items on your list. Next, please. So if I have a health and safety concern as an employee, who should I speak with? First step is to speak with your supervisor and or manager. And if that doesn't work, you ought to go to your Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety representative, and you ought to know who they are because their names ought to be posted on the Joint Health and Safety Committee board. Next, please. Dealing with Joint Health and Safety Committee issues and building consensus. So all of this to say, you want to separate the people from the problem. If there's a legitimate health and safety hazard or concern, let's try to tackle that and remove the people and the personalities away from that and deal with the issue, because that's what it's all about. Focus on common ground, common goal, prevention of accidents and injuries to our membership in the workplace. Insist on using objective criteria. Listen and respond, clarify thoughts, be respectful. You can actually have that in your terms of reference that, we're going to attend our meetings, we're going to be respectful during meetings, there's no sides. Again, you can be as creative as you want with the terms of reference. And it's very important to have. I feel that's one of the main reasons committees are dysfunctional, because they don't have a terms of reference. I avoid judgmental language, again, respect in the workplace, and Joint Health and Safety Committee members are all on the same team. And that's something that maybe we should have plastered on all headings for Joint Health and Safety Committee documentation. We're all on the same team. This isn't about egos. This isn't about management versus employees. That's what the team is for. Everybody has a voice, and everybody is a voice to the employees that brought forth issues to them, and this is where they can discuss those in a safe manner during the committee meetings. Next. So we know this was a difficult presentation to listen to because of all the legislation, but we hope that we stirred some excitement in you and that there are ways to resolve some of the issues. Documentation is one way. And if there's any other issues that you know, as the presentation went forward that you want to discuss with us, you just, contact James or I or anybody else at Ocal, and we'll be happy to try to assist you. Next.
All right. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email Sonia or I at the following email addresses, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And we have started to record podcasts on our OPods, and these are on our website, and I have personally confirmed they are also on the Apple Podcast app. So whatever app you're happy to use, your favorite app platform, please do look us up. Just search for Ocal, and you can listen at your own convenience during a drive-in to work, if you will, and you'll hear us speaking about health and safety and occupational health issues as you're caring about your business. Thank you all for listening.